I'm here with Mark Ludwig, and Mark, I've got to tell you that you're one of the people that has really inspired me for what's going on here. I know that you don't work by yourself. I know that you have a team, but what you're doing for shared parenting in Missouri, I followed you for quite some time. I think you're a hero. You may think otherwise, but can you tell us what's going on in Missouri and what you see for the future here in shared parenting?
Sure. Let me first. I do want to give credit. You did mention we're very fortunate in Missouri to have just a great team. Anything like this doesn't happen with one person, and if it does, I'm certainly not the main person, believe it or not. My name gets put in the spotlight a lot because of the connections I have with the media and the legislators and my past background. But there have been a lot of people, to be honest, in the state of Missouri. Linda Reutzel is a lady who she was a grandmother and realized that her son was pretty much a stay-at-home dad that really cared for the son, or cared for his child, and then all of a sudden they walked out of court and she realized he was relegated to an every other weekend dad, and she walked out of that courtroom just shocked. So she kind of led the charge, and we've got Jeremy Roberts, who has done just a great job here in Missouri. We've got Kenneth Goins, that an attorney that's been working with us. Just a lot of neat people on the team. But yeah, here in Missouri we've got a lot of neat things going. We've got 10 different bills going in Missouri. From what I understand, we're up to 37 nationwide. And it's just kind of exciting to see the whole shared parenting movement all come together. What we need to get people to realize is that's it. We need people to come together. When I added up, when you add all the different organizations that are out there, we've got close to 1 million people already. The challenge is we're all fragmented. Mm-hmm. And just like with a military operation, when allied forces come together, they need to all come together in unison. You can't have one army doing this, one army doing this, and nobody orchestrating what's going on. You definitely can't have people shooting people in their own foxhole. And I understand, we've got such a passionate issue, people are frustrated, they're wanting to make a change. If people don't come in with a background in the political area or the legislative area, in their mind they have an idea of what they think needs to be done, and so they want to do that. The challenge is we have 1 million people all with a slightly different strategy, and 1 million strategies don't work. It's just like if you buy a McDonald's franchise, you may have a better way to make a burger, but if you want to be successful, you're going to do it the way McDonald's says. They have a system and a pattern. Yes, there may be a better tasting burger. There may be a cheaper burger. There may be a better way to market. Doesn't matter. They've got a unified system, and you know that any McDonald's you walk into across the country, you know exactly the countertop's going to be so high. You know what the menu's going to look like. You know everything about it. If we can get our movement with shared parenting united that same way, it's amazing what we could accomplish across the country. So what we need to do is get people to understand that, yes, we're all going to have different idiosyncrasies. Each organization is, and that's good. But what we need to figure out, okay, what's the common ground? What we all believe in, I think, is that every child deserves a right to have a good relationship with both their mother and their father. And that the thing should be technically gender neutral. A child should have access to both their parents and extended families on both sides. I think we all agree on that. Now, how we go about that may be a little different, but it's important for us to focus on what do we agree on first instead of the differences. The opposing parties love for us to fight amongst ourselves. We can't be doing that. We've got the resources. Now we're to the point where we can take it to the next level. The next level is within the different mini organizations, everybody's going to have different specialties. We've got an organization called Time to Put Kids First. They're the ones who put this piece together. They are great in regards to research. I think the next move for the entire shared parenting movement is to figure out who has specialties in different areas, who has specialties in media relations, who has specialties in legislative research, who has specialties in media research, who has specialties in documenting, who has specialties in fundraising. And we all sort of work together that, hey, if we need some fundraising things, we're going to go to this segment. If we need some research, we're going to this segment. If we have different things going on in Texas, we're going to have a Texas group that kind of specializes, one in each state. So we need to figure out, okay, what do we do in common? And then from there, what is each organization's specialty that we can each go to? If we can do that, no different than a baseball team or a football team. Yes, they all have different positions to play, but what we need to figure out, okay, who's the quarterback? Okay, who's the wide receiver? Who's on offensive line? Who's on defensive line? Who's the kicker? That's the next step that we need to come to within this movement. And if we do, I'll tell you what, guys, we're going to get things changed. 1 million people with all these organizations channeled in the right direction, we can and we are going to change this movement over the next 5 years. Big key is also understand this is going to take some time. It's not going to happen this year. Probably won't happen next year. We're looking at about a 5 to 7 year plan. And I know some people get frustrated. Well, why should it take so long? Doesn't matter, it does. And people have been trying this for 30 years. I think to do it right, another 5 to 7 years isn't too long to ask. Now, some states may happen pretty quickly. I think in Missouri we are making some great progress. We're probably 1 to 2 years away from getting a lot of the things we want. And the ripple effect is going to go across the country. But game plan-wise, we're looking at 5 to 7 years. But if we've waited 30 years for this, 5 to 7 years to finally make the changes we need isn't going to take too much longer. Key is, once again, let's focus on all uniting, figure out who has strengths, lock arms. There's a million people strong, and I'll tell you what, guys, we're going to make a difference.
Wow, that's really good. You're talking about Missouri. You said that Missouri may be 1 to 2 years away. Tell me more about Missouri.
It may actually be this year. We've got, as I said, because of the team that we have here, we've got Jeremy, we've got Linda, we've got Kenneth, we've got a guy named Scott Smith that is another great researcher, another attorney. And I hate to mention names because there's always going to be people left out. And there's some people that, not to be over-spiritualistic, but it's amazing how things have come together over the last 2 years. We had a situation this past Wednesday where we needed to get with the Speaker of the House to talk about something that was going on. And a lady came through town that just happened to know him because she grew up with him. And like I said, it's just amazing how she just happened to be at the Capitol. He was walking through the hallway, saw her, stopped, asked a question. We were able to talk to him about some issues, about some of our bills that needed to be talked about. And so I hate to mention names because I'm going to leave people out. But bottom line, we've got a whole team of people that have worked together. We've got 10 different bills issued this year. The 2 primary ones are what I call sort of the holy grail, if you will, of shared parenting. It's the 50-50 rebuttable presumption, which basically states that 2 parents walking into a courtroom, a child is presumed to have equal access to both of them, subject to a rebuttable presumption that if there's any avenues there's 8 different points of consideration that need to be addressed. But barring any of those considerations, when you walk into a courtroom, it should be equal. In every other area of law, it's innocent until proven guilty. There's no reason in the world why walking into a courtroom, one parent should have a bias over the other. So we've been working on this for years. We have this exact same bill in the Senate and the House this year, which is kind of neat. So we have 2 different directions to be able to go with that. Now, just so that people know, that doesn't guarantee it's going to be passed this year. The momentum is on our side because of what we did last year. If we had enough time, I'm almost 100% certain it would for sure pass. And I think it still may. The challenge we're running into is, from a procedural standpoint in the state of Missouri, we had a transition where we had a governor from one party who had been there for 2 terms that moved out. We have a new governor now that has his priority items, and those obviously are going to take precedence. So the legislature is trying to work through all those priority items. If it was any other year, if it was the 2nd year of his administration or the 3rd year, I'm convinced we probably would have already had it passed. The challenge is a clock issue, and we only have 6.5 more weeks in Missouri to get it done. So it's really just going to be a maneuvering and a time standpoint. If it doesn't get passed this year, I'm almost 100% confident it will be passed next year. But that's not to get people thinking, oh, that means it's not going to pass. It still has, I believe, an 80 to 90% chance passing this year. If it goes to the floor, it's going to pass. The question is, because of the formal calendar and the way things are laid out, can we get it to the floor?
You know, one thing that I've appreciated in the videos of yours that I've watched is that you're not blasting anybody. You know, there are some places where, because of the procedural issues that you're talking about, or new people coming into the government, people want things done right away. And if somebody's not working for them immediately, it's almost like there's anger directed at that person. And I've never seen that with you. And I appreciate that so much. Now, so I'm assuming then that you have some type of relationship with these people, that you understand what their agendas are. You understand that some things do take time. Can you comment a little bit further on that?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. I've got a 25-year background of working with the legislature. I was on the Small Business Policy Council for the state of Missouri for 3 years. So I worked on dozens and dozens of pieces of legislation. So I've got that background. I've got the connection already, the relationship. And I think that's where the frustration comes in. Most people, obviously, if you're talking about someone's child, emotions hit an all-time high.
Right.
And there's a frustration because every day that passes that a parent is without their child, that emotion continues to be elevated.
Right.
So I understand people's passion. The challenge is, if you look at the history of legislation in America, it takes time. And what most people think is, well, I'm just going to write a letter to my legislator, and they're going to take care of it, immediately get the change. realize from a legislator standpoint, most legislatures around the country, they're only in session about 5 months out of the year. And most of these people, they're not paid what you think. They're not paid like the federal legislators. In the state of Missouri, I could be wrong, but I think it's $33,000 a year is what a Missouri legislator is paid. That's not a livable wage for somebody who's commuting between two homes and trying to have a family out of town. So, these people for 5 months of the year, and these people are working long hours too. And I'm not exaggerating. I've been there where they get there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's not only not unusual, it's very common for them to be there until 6, 7, 8 o'clock. And especially towards the end of the session, there's many, many times they're there till 10, 11 o'clock at night. And we're not talking once or twice. We're talking, this has already happened. We're already, last week we were 7 weeks out from the end of session. And there were 2 nights last week that the legislators were there from 7 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. Now, they're also throwing about an average of between 1,000 and 2,000 bills. Most of those bills are 10, 20, 30 pages long. That they have to study those bills, understand the bills, trying to figure out is there something snuck into the bill that they need to be aware of. There's just not enough time for a legislator to get that. So what it takes is building a relationship with some legislators who don't have the time to do their own research, that you can educate them. But before you can educate a legislator, the first thing they want to know is, are you a credible source? So a constituent who means well, but talking to a legislator that they've never met. Think of this. If someone comes up to you off the street while you're walking down the street and tries selling you something, doesn't your guard immediately go up? You don't know, is this person a scam artist? What are they? Well, that's what happens. A legislator doesn't know. They've never met you before. They don't know your background. You may be legitimate, but they don't know. So 2 things a legislator wants to know is, number 1, are you a credible source for whatever you're going to talk about? And then, does the information you're talking about have credibility? But you've got to prove yourself first. And that's not saying they're better than you. That's no different than you and I meeting a stranger off the street. So it takes time to build a relationship. And that's why I get calls on a daily basis, literally, from people in other states that say, hey, I'm wanting to introduce a bill into my state this week. And I just tell them, if you don't have relationships built with legislators, you don't go the first year trying to get a bill introduced. You spend a good year or 2 going to your state capitol, meeting face-to-face with your legislators. Many of these times are only going to take about 5 minutes, so you're going to meet with them. You don't overextend your welcome. It's just so they start seeing your face and connecting the face with the issue. But it's going to take a good year to 2 years of building relationships before you're ever at a point where you could expect to get a bill introduced. If you introduce a bill too soon, what ends up happening is you blow your credibility, and it's actually going to end up, you win the battle, but you lose the war. Mm-hmm. You need to go in with a strategy of saying, okay, what's my game plan? Sort of like Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind, and then work backwards to figure out a strategy. I'm definitely more than willing to help anybody out in any state. If you have questions, give me a call. I think most of you know that I do a video series every Monday night at 7 o'clock Central Time on a Facebook Live. So find my personal Facebook page. I'm not the most technical savvy, so I'm going to get people like Jeff and Cheryl Feinberg and people like that. They're going to help me try and get the message out. But every week I'm going to pick a short topic. I'm going to try and keep it between 5 and 10 minutes, ideally 5 to 7 minutes. 1 week, how to talk to a legislator. 1 week, how to talk to a legislative aide. 1 week, how to talk to media people, how to talk in sound bites. 1 week where I did one on how to have a successful Senate hearing. I'm going to do one on how to have an ideal testimony before a hearing for a Senate or a House. So every week I'm going to pick a different topic to help educate people on how to try and get a bill passed. But it is going to take some time. You're not going to do it in 1 year. It's going to take a while.
I think that is really, really amazing and good what you're talking about doing, and what you are doing. I mean, I've seen some of the videos as well. And, from a parent's perspective or grandparents, my situation is as a grandparent. The emotions are there. And you want to say something because at the same time this is going on, it's not just about you. You're talking about your children. You're talking about your grandchildren. And as that sign says, that, parents or children need both parents. Children need their grandparents. Grandchildren need their grandparents. Grandparents need their grandchildren. And these are issues that should be so common sense that it makes people frustrated to say, why does it take so long? And I think that your perspective on it to just say, we're going to have to take the emotion out of it. Not that the emotion isn't there, because it's obviously still there, but you've got to look at it as a strategy to say, how are we going to do this? What is the end in mind? How will we get there? And I think your words are words of wisdom to say, we need to plan this out, It's not going to happen today. I remember reading in the book Good to Great. They were talking. Yeah, they were talking about a man who was in Hanoi Hilton, and what they said is that the people who said, "We're going to be out by Christmas. We're going to be out. We're going to be out." They were the ones that didn't make it. Yeah. But the people who said, "We are going to be out. We don't know when. It may be 4 years, 6 years." They were the ones that were able to get the attitude within themselves to actually survive it. And that's what I've tried to do. Some of the stuff that I'm looking at, I'm saying, okay, you know what? I don't know when it's going to happen, but I am planting seeds. I don't want this to happen to my children. I don't want this to happen to my grandchildren. And, how are we going to win? And I think your words are just tremendous. Anything else you want to add before we close this up?
I think two things. And one you bring up is we always have to remember it's about the kids. And, anytime I speak before a legislator or anyone else, I'm trying to be cognizant of the fact that, yes, obviously I have a desire to have more quality time with my own son. But more importantly, it's my son that deserves the time with me. And it's all the kids who deserve equal time with both of their parents. So you have to keep that in mind. It's not about the father. It's not about the mother. It should never be. It's about a child who is born that has the right to equal access to both of their parents. You need to make sure that you're always thinking and framing your message from the child's standpoint, because that's bottom line what it's really about. The other thing that you had alluded to, which I think I veered off track, but you had talked about not getting mad at people and not letting your emotions take over. There's going to be times where, especially like with legislation, where it doesn't get passed in time. And the clock runs out on the legislative session. And there's going to be a tendency to get mad and point fingers at, how dare this person didn't bring it up on the House floor. You got to realize, if it didn't get brought up on the House floor this year, it needs to be brought up next year. Don't make an enemy of the person who didn't bring it up, because you're going to need them next year.
Right.
So you can't make enemies. And I think that's one of the neat things about this is it's such a universally affected case that, obviously I'm very, very conservative on the political spectrum. I'm like off the chart conservative. But what I've noticed is there's some people that are as far off the chart liberally about this issue, because especially I think of minorities. This issue affects minorities at like an 8-fold higher rate. If you drive through areas that are controlled in liberal areas and you see the homeless or the fatherlessness, look at all the poverty and look at all the crime in all those areas. Almost all those areas are affected because the fathers aren't in the home.
Right.
And I was able to find a common bond. And what you can't do is allow the fact that, well, I'm an ultra-conservative, so I don't like any liberals. You're not going to get very far in a state capitol with that approach.
Right.
And that's one thing that you always have to remember. Just a parting advice probably is anybody, from the time you walk into the Capitol, it doesn't matter whether you can't stand anybody personally or not. When you're within the walls of the Capitol, in my mind, that's an institution for our country and for your state. And you should respect the walls of that institution and everyone within there. So it doesn't matter how much I disagree with someone politically. When we're inside the walls of that Capitol, I'm going to respect that person. I'm going to respect their office. I'm going to respect their legislative aides. And just because, two things. Number one, because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
But secondly, because that person is probably going to end up on a committee somewhere. And if I've alienated someone and I've talked about how they're corrupt, or that's another thing too, don't ever talk about all CPS workers are corrupt, or all judges are corrupt, or all attorneys are corrupt. Yes, there's some attorneys and judges and CPS workers that a lot of us are frustrated with. But you have to realize, some of those people sitting on those committees have sons or daughters who are CPS workers, have sisters or brothers that are judges. So if you lump everyone into a category, you just alienated one of the votes that you need to get through.
Right.
It's not really fair. Just like we don't want them throwing every one of us in that, oh, all dads would be bad fathers. Well, then let's make sure that we play by the same rules. Let's don't lump everybody else in a category. Let's focus on the issue and not the person. But I'll tell you what, guys, like I said, we've got the momentum going for us. I know it doesn't seem as fast as you want it to go, but to realize we are close to 1 million people strong now across the country. We've got organizations that are starting to become identified as sort of the experts in research, the experts in this area, in all the different areas. Our time's coming. We're within 5 to 7 years, I believe, of every one of the 50 states having an equal shared parenting bill.
Wow, this is really great. Thanks so much for your time.
All right, thanks, Jeff.